Welcome to the LSI Behind the Wind podcast. My name is Sean Slatter, and for 30 years, I've dedicated my life to the science of business development. I've seen the impact of our work, which has evolved into economic development and now social impact. And in this episode, I'm joined by Elizabeth. We call her Sissi DeWitt. She is one of our graphic artists and someone that I really admire. In our conversation, we talk a lot about creativity and how we have incorporated graphic art into our business development methodology. I think you'll find this a fascinating conversation between Sissi and me, and I hope you enjoy this discussion. Sissi, I'm so excited to have you as my guest this morning. I've been excited to have this conversation with you, and you have been one of the individuals that we have wanted to talk with for a couple of years. You had been on my list of individuals that I really admire, and so thanks for being a part of this.
No, thank you for the kind words, and thank you for having me.
So before we start, I've got a number of questions for you, but just talk about your background and your history, and how did you end up in this world of art?
Okay. So that's a really long and complicated story.
Well, start with this. Give us your background.
Okay. So originally from Canada, from Quebec, and my parents immigrated there from Austria. So and my two brothers as well. So I was the first one in my family to be born in Canada. And so we were raised there, and eventually we immigrated to the States, to Pennsylvania. And I went to high school in Pennsylvania, and then went to Penn State and studied business in Penn State, which was a disaster. Business is not something that really comes easy for me. So it was a big struggle. And I struggled for quite a bit. And also what I did when I was young, I worked at a veterinary hospital, and I always worked at a veterinary hospital. So when I finally got out from under the whole business thing, I was always working as a helper in a veterinary clinic. And so I decided to take veterinary classes. And so I did my pre-vet and also worked, as a vet tech, and then applied for veterinary school and then had kind of this sort of come to Jesus moment, I guess, and decided that maybe being a veterinarian was a little bit too heartbreaking for me, because I cried a lot. I mean, it was really hard. So then I went to my parents and I said, listen, I don't think I can do this. And I think I want to be an artist. And you can only imagine how well that went over.
Okay, so let me stop you. First of all, how old were you when you left Quebec?
Let's see. I think I was 12, I think 12 or 13. Yeah.
So you'd spent most of your childhood in Canada, in Quebec, and then moved to Pennsylvania. How was that traumatic?
In a sense, yes. I did love Canada a lot, and I still do. And it was pretty nice. It was, Pennsylvania didn't really appeal to me all that much. It was a hard place for me. I think, I think about it a lot, when I think back of, like where, like I grew up. I mean, I grew up in Pennsylvania as well, but it didn't have like the same energy, or, like it didn't really feel like home where Quebec did. And so we went back often. We were there a lot. We had a cabin up north, about an hour north of Montreal, in the Laurentians. And so we spent a lot of time up there, and our summers were up there. And in fact, my family's still up there, and my brother just bought another cabin up there last year. So yeah, we're still, we still are very, very connected to that area. Where we lived in Pennsylvania, there's no connection whatsoever. So yeah, it's.
So you moved there when you're 13 and finished high school in the U.S. and became a U.S. citizen while you were a teenager, I assume?
No, I didn't become a citizen until, this is kind of a funny story, but so I was always an Austrian citizen because my parents were Austrian, and then I met Dominic, my future husband. He was a Belgian citizen. And we thought, well, just in case he wanted to immigrate to the States as well, because he was a Belgian citizen, I became a US citizen like 6 days before we married.
I didn't know that. I thought you became a citizen when you were a kid. And okay, interesting.
Yeah, so we traveled back and forth quite a bit. So we just all stayed Austrian citizens. And then, and with Canada, it was really easy too. I also had a Canadian passport. And so it was really easy to kind of go back and forth. And I mean, it never was an issue until, Dominic was like, I think, it would be easier if you were a US citizen. And so, yeah, but it didn't go over with the INS very well, which is now the ICE. So, yeah, so we were interviewed quite a bit, and we really had to go through that whole process because they really thought, we were only getting married for the green card, So, yeah, so we had to go through quite a bit, and we finally did pass, but boy, it was a little bit nerve-wracking there in the beginning because they really thought, that we were trying to pull one over. I mean, yeah, 6 days before marriage, that's kind of.
So going back to your history, you spent your teenage years in Pennsylvania, went to Penn State, thinking you were going to go into business, and then vet school, and then you just had this decision that you really were an artist at heart and that you were going to pursue art.
Yeah. And it's really funny, I've always been an artist, and and it was a different generation at that point as well. It was always that idea that, okay, you're never going to really have a career in art. It was more like a hobby sort of a thing, which, of course that's changed. But at that time it was kind of this thing, that my parents were like, oh, come on, art is something you're really good at, but it's not a career. But yeah, that changed. I had a couple of really, really good professors that told me otherwise and said, no, you can survive as an artist and you can do it.
So you and I have known each other for a long time now. And
Yeah.
as I said, I've admired your work, and I have a lot of your pieces, and
Thank you.
you've done so many amazing special pieces for me, for the company, for some of our civic organizations that we both love. And so I can talk about, now you've had this long career as an artist, and talk about this path that you chose in pursuing art as a career.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I went to school to be a designer, and so I kind of went into the more commercial line of art. So it was design and illustration, and so I did my undergrad, and then decided to go to graduate school as well. And during graduate school, for a tuition waiver, you can teach some 10-10 classes, and they kind of, let you dabble a little bit in teaching. And for some reason, I taught my first class and I was hooked, absolutely hooked. So, and I never left. I'm still there. I'm still at, the same building that I started, my graduate work in. But my graduate work was focused on the birds of the Great Salt Lake. And I chose that, and a lot of my choices in undergrad and graduate school had to do a lot with animals, and because of my veterinary background. So so I thought, well, if I'm not going to be a veterinarian, if that is too hard, if that's too heartbreaking for me, I was going to try to help and also serve that purpose of my love for animals. So I was always kind of focused on that sort of direction. So you'll notice in my work, most of it has some sort of aspect of either the environment or animals, and mostly birds. And moths, I really have a thing for anything that flies.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I guess I figured if I couldn't save the world as a doctor, I was going to save it as an artist. So
I love that. You've told me this story before that your focus was the birds of the Great Salt Lake. Talk about that study a bit more.
So I was really fortunate when I was in grad school. A local author who is one of my absolute heroes is Terry Tempest Williams, and she had written a book called Refuge. And I'd read it a few years before that, and I loved the book. I mean, it made me fall in love with Utah, like 100%. It was really a beautiful, beautiful book. And so while I was at grad school at the U, I heard that she was in the English department teaching classes. So I marched myself down to the English building and just walked right into her office and said, "This is what I'm doing. You are like the most amazing person. You're my hero. And can we work together?" And she's like, "Sure." It was amazing. She is an amazing, amazing woman. I really love her. She's such a beautiful person, beautiful, like inside and out. And so she let me take a few of her poems and illustrate them. And that was my graduate work. So, and my graduate show. So yeah. And her book, The Refuge, is about the lake, and it's also about her mother, but the lake, was what more that resonated with me was the lake and the birds and just being out in that environment and the surrealness of it and just the amazing beauty, but also the underrated beauty. It's an unusual beauty. It's not your typical, I mean, the mountains are so beautiful here, and it steals the show, where the lake also has this intense beauty, but in a different way. And then the birds, it's kind of it was certainly unknown to me that there were 250, species of birds that use that lake as a migratory stop off on the way to Mexico. It's really an important part of the world, and I didn't know any of this until she told me. And so it was really, I was so fortunate that it all just worked so perfectly for me, and it really put me on a path that I'm still on, 22 years later. Yeah.
So for people that aren't familiar with the Wasatch, it's a very interesting geography. It's a basin framed on all sides by mountains with this incredible Great Salt Lake in the bottom of this basin. And as you said, it's really an ecosystem unlike anything in the world. And when I was a kid, the Great Salt Lake was so large, it created where I lived was almost an island because the lake came out to the south and to the north and created almost this peninsula at the peak. And sadly, over the last few years, it's now at its lowest recorded history for a lot of reasons, drought and development and agriculture and whatnot that has diverted that water. So I've had this long love of the lake as well. Sissy, growing up, my house was on the east side of this basin in the foothills of the mountains. And every night I would watch the sun go down over the Great Salt Lake and I've had this real love for the lake as you have, and even today, where we live, you and I don't live too far from each other. There's this great point that you can drive up onto the hill and watch the sun go down. I've seen sunsets all over the world. I think the sunsets over the Great Salt Lake may be some of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen in my life.
Absolutely, hands down. Yes, it's amazing. What?
When you were doing this study, were you there? Did you go out to the lake and observe the birds and the environment and talk about that?
Yeah, I did. I did a lot of hiking out there, and yeah, just immersed myself into that whole area, the bird refuge up north in
Bear River?
Bear River, yeah, and also Antelope Island. And I spent a lot of time on Antelope Island, and yeah, lots of bug bites, but it was so worth it. It was, and especially and another like really really fortunate thing that happened to me during this time. My neighbor, he bought a sailboat, and he taught himself. He retired. He retired really young, and he bought himself a sailboat, like 25-foot thing, and put it on the Great Salt Lake and taught himself how to sail out there. And he would take me. And I mean, unbelievable. Like on the western side of the lake, it's unbelievable
It is.
what's out there, how surreal. And the water is pink and the sky is blue. I mean, it's and I say that and it's like, okay, yeah, sure. But no, it really is. It's incredible how
It is.
gorgeous it is.
And it changes with the seasons and the weather, and there's something new all the time. And
Yeah.
I know that there is an effort. In fact, our team is working a project to capture grants and funding to restore the lake. And so it's interesting to see how much it's changed even in the last few years as we've been in the middle of this drought in the West.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that it's successful. It would be sad to see, that it not bounce back. I mean, I know from history, it ebbs and flows. That lake is, historically it goes back and forth. But I'm really, really, really hoping that it's able to bounce back. I mean, this one's going to be a big bounce back, but hopefully can help it works.
While you were doing this project, did you know much about ornithology and how did you were you one of the organizations that I love is the Audubon Society, and I mean, how did you prepare for this project?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I completely immersed myself in with, so I did connect with Audubon. I did connect with one organization that really helped a lot, and that was Friends of Great Salt Lake.
Mhm.
Linda Freitas, who runs that organization, she's fabulous. What an awesome person. She's like, between her and Terry Tempest Williams, like I had some pretty awesome heroes when I was in grad school. Like these women like were such awesome models too. So and then I did some work for Great Friends of Great Salt Lake, and yeah, the Smithsonian. I also work. I immersed myself like completely into that world because I didn't know anything about any of it. I mean, I was completely fascinated, but like I was new. Like it was, but it was a definitely a work of love. I didn't sleep or vacuum my house or anything like that for 2 years, but it was all worth it.
Love
And
it.
the work that came out, I'm still really proud of everything that came out of those 2 years of completely immersing myself into that world. Yeah, it's probably some of my I'm more proud of that work than a lot of my other work.
I would
It
love to
was really meaningful.
I would love to see that portfolio at some point. Let's find time to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
So you started, you said you had this love of teaching, and what was it about teaching art that was so appealing to you?
Probably the biggest thing that really hooks me every semester. I mean, it's been 22 years, every semester, the sparks that fly, it's such a fabulous environment where, you can just sit there with a bunch of kids and sparks are flying everywhere. And it's just beautiful to see, and especially like classes like intro to visual arts, like it's just it's introduction class. It's a 10-10, but I still love to teach it because the kids will see, things like, things that they've seen in social media or pop culture, and they're like, oh, hey, and oh, I know this, and oh, so that's the backstory of that. Are you kidding me? So this art history sort of thing, it's fabulous because they're seeing all these connections are being made, and I love it. I love to see that. I'd love to see when kids get hooked on art and love art. I'm not a studio teacher. I taught studio classes for a little bit, but that was not really where I excelled or thrived. I do better in lecture classes where I can just sit with the kids and just discuss things and talk about things. And I'm a little bit better that way and making connections. And yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest part for me is just seeing these discoveries and connections.
So much of your work is centered around color and design, and you've got this very unique style. Do you want to talk about, I mean, maybe some just your own self reflection on how you have incorporated this expertise of color and design and then this really unique style that you have into your teaching?
So when I started at the University of Utah, the chair of my committee, or when I was in grad school, you have to have a committee that oversees your graduate work for those years that you're studying. So the chair of my committee was McRae Magleby, which he's my mentor, and he's one of the most amazing artist. I've loved his work since as long as I can remember. He was actually named one of the top 10 designers of the world. He worked for BYU for years. He was their graphic designer and then taught at the U as well. And so he was my chair of my committee and also my mentor and still is. And my work is very influenced by his work and all his heroes. His heroes are my heroes. So if you ever look at his work, it's really easy to see the parallel. And it's really funny. Just recently, I did a logo for Goal Foundation, and they invited me over to their office, and I'd never been there before. And we went into the conference room, and on one whole wall is all McRae Magleby's posters. And I just was like, are you kidding me? Oh my gosh, did you guys know? Like this man is my mentor, and he's my, they're like, no. I'm like, yeah, I even, so there was one poster. So McRae, so he did work for the Olympics. So when I was in grad school, so it was 2000, so 98 to 2000. And then I was, I still stayed there, and McRae was there as well. And I got to watch the process of him doing work for the Olympics, which was like so cool. So so his posters like that were on the wall for the Olympics at the Goal Foundation, I was like, I got to see the sketches of those. Like it was really cool. But yeah, so definitely he is a huge influence, and color wise as well. He has an aesthetic that is, it reminds me very much of sort of an Eastern sort of design aesthetic, which is also, very influential on me, like Japanese and the more like the sort of this color palette that is just like unexpected and unusual and I think Eastern art, and Japanese art, Chinese art, I think in my perspective, those artists, those designers, they have it. Like they get it. Like they just, like the way I look at it, like they understand design and color like so well. Like, and maybe it's because it's not, what I'm used to, where I can look at it and admire it, but it also really influences me a lot. So yeah, I will appropriate a lot of work from the East into my own work, that sort of the natural sort of design and aesthetic, that sort of almost a Buddhist sort of. I think if I ever chose a religion, it would be Buddhist.
So our work is, as you know, it's very technical. Sometimes it's very complex, and yet I've always had this belief that creativity is an energy, and it doesn't matter whether you're working a large proposal or you're working a memo or a letter or an email. That creative energy it's the same. And we're going to talk about some of the work within LSI and some of the work that you're doing today. But when you work with these individuals in at the university over the last more than 2 decades, how would you guide a student to develop creativity?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually taught a class on creative problem solving for a few years, and you're absolutely right. It's something, creativity, it's in everything. And I think that people have this idea that it's some sort of a magical sort of, you know, thing that comes down from the sky and zaps you like a lightning. And it's not like that at all. It's really, you have to just kind of, let it sort of not have this mystique, and just look at it for what it is. It's something that we all have that potential for being extremely creative. It's just whether or not you allow, that sort of flow, and kind of let your inhibitions about the whole thing kind of, flow. So when I talk to students about it, I usually say, yeah, just kind of make some fertile ground, kind of prepare your sort of your life, and your sort of way of looking at things. You can just create this ground that's super fertile, and just let things kind of happen, and not be so uptight about this whole idea of accepting ideas that could potentially turn into, the idea.
I think a lot of people, as you said, have this idea that creativity is something where you're going to be inspired and want to go do something creative, whatever it is, write or paint or compose, whatever your creative outlet is. And absolutely, there are moments in your life where you will you're in love, or you're you're going to be inspired through beauty, or you'll have an idea and you're compelled to create. What about all of those days where you are having a horrible day and yet you have to be creative? That is so fascinating to me, where yeah, I mean anybody can be inspired in the moment and want to go be creative and do something creative, but to develop that skill of creativity every day, where no matter what's happening, you have a headache, or you had a bad day, or and you still have to get up and create. How, as an artist, how do you work through those moments where you don't feel creative and you need to create?
That is an excellent question. And that is probably one of the most intimidating things about being an artist, because it comes and goes. There's moments where, like I will just be so full on creative, and just, it's just coming out of me. Like, I mean, and then there's moments, long, treacherous moments where there's just nothing. I'm tapped out. And I think over the years I've learned to understand, that those moments of being tapped out, drained, and just, vapor locked, or that they don't last, that they go away. So I'll usually give myself a little bit of time, and I'll go and do some other things, get a different perspective. But those are all things I had to learn. They didn't come, and no one told me in art school that there would be, those really dark days of like stress, and where you're just day after day, it's just not coming, it's not coming, it's not coming. And, but those are the moments where, yeah, you just have to figure it out. And everyone is different. For me, it was, doing other things, riding my bike, or going skiing, or going hiking. Hiking is probably one of the biggest triggers of getting past, that sort of block that scares every artist right down to the very core of their being, because it is pretty hard. It's horrendously scary when people are expecting something, and you're just not, there's nothing.
It's a skill too.
Yes.
I mean, it's like running, it's like anything else. It's a skill. And one of the things that I have learned in business is that oftentimes we see individuals that have all of the business skills, understand how to read a balance sheet and all the technical pieces, and they have zero ability to be creative. And really, there is so much creativity required for business, and especially what we do in our business development and economic development, social impact work. It requires an immense amount of creative energy. And I have found in the last 30 years of my career that those individuals that have that ability to be creative and can connect the dots succeed. And if you don't have the ability to do that, it's not going to work. And so trying to convince the academia in general that art is so important because of that element, where so much of business in general, but especially what we do, requires that same kind of creative energy that you use to complete a piece of artwork. It's the same thing, that same type of creative energy to create a campaign around anything, especially something that's very complex. And how do you even start? So my question for you is, you said sometimes if you're not feeling creative, you'll take a walk and go to get to the mountains. I have that same routine as well. I'm inspired being in the mountains, especially in snow. But do you have a routine or an algorithm that you use for getting in that creative mindset?
Yeah. And you're so absolutely right when you say that, yeah, that there's creativity, and everything is so underestimated. Yeah, McCray Magleby, he taught me when I was in school. He had like this list of 10 ways to spark and get past a block or a moment where you're just, you're so tense, and it makes it worse, right? Like you're trying to solve a problem, and this is any problem, either an artistic design or business problem, or writing something, or you're just so worked up and you're just like frozen. I call it vapor lock, and So he would have this list of 10 different things to kind of get you past. And it really works. It helps. It really kind of gets you out of your head, and into, and one of those things, McRae Magleby was also a big hiker. And one of those was, just get out of your office or your studio and just get another perspective, any perspective, just get another perspective and just clear out your head for a moment and then come back. And as soon as you come back, you have a completely different, fresh perspective on this problem that you're trying to solve. And sometimes the problem is going to last for, weeks on end, but coming to terms with that and just kind of working through and not stressing so badly about it, really, really helps. And then just going through, these creative problem solving steps that really, they do work, and they work for any discipline. When I was teaching that class for creative problem solving, I had a lot of engineering students and physics students, and it really helped them a lot as well, with their problems that, we just taught ourselves how to just get out of our sort of, mindset and do crazy things. We used to do really fun things. We used to go fly a kite for class, and then come back and try to solve problems. It was really fun. It was a super, it was a super fun class to teach. And also it really surprised a lot of my students because, here you're getting students from, a completely different part of campus where everything is really black and white. And here they get this, this class where, this professor is going, hey, let's go fly a kite and then come back and try to solve this problem. Just like,
Whoa. But what I think is interesting about this discussion is that, this about me, and a lot of people that are close to me know that every time I have a campaign that I'm working or something that is complex and I need that creative energy, I go to the mountains. And usually, I mean, preferably there's some snow and skiing involved when I'm doing this, but even in the summertime, just getting into the mountains for me clears my mind, and I have that ability to think and work through some of these creative issues where I come back. I mean, Summer, my assistant Summer, for years, she's known that if I spend a few hours in the mountains on skis, I'll be back with all kinds of ideas on whatever it is I'm working on. And I think your advice to whatever that is, I mean, get quiet, don't, let it come to you, get into the mountains or get into nature, and it'll just, things will come. These ideas will come, and then you'll be ready to create. I mean, that is the hardest thing, I think, for any creative process, is that building that foundation so that when you sit down and write or paint or compose or whatever that is, you're ready.
Yeah, it's creating that fertile ground. Yeah.
So we're going to get to some of the LSI art, incorporating art into the LSI methodology in a minute. But I have a couple of other questions for you. Do you have other creative conduits that you use? I mean, I know that graphic art is really your love and passion, and you're amazing. But do you have other conduits for creativity that you lean on?
As far as an outlet,
Music, or I mean, do you write? Do you compose music? Are there some other conduits of creativity that you pull those levers in your work?
So music is probably one of the biggest things for me. Like music is extremely important for me. And unfortunately, I don't create music. And that's probably, one of my bigger regrets, because I think I would have really enjoyed creating music, but that's okay. I admire music. And all kinds of music. I mean, it can go from, you know, Karina Burana to last night I went to an alt J concert, like, and it's alternative. I mean, it's a full spectrum. It's so important to me, and it takes me right out of my head. Like I'll just go full on and just feel every little thing in the music, and that transports me into, and it's not necessarily a creative outlet for me, but it's something that will inspire me so much to listen to something so beautiful. And it's all beautiful for me. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like it can be anything, even my kids' band, I'm listening to them, and it inspires me. So as a conduit, yeah, for sure. But unfortunately, I can't help when, like I can't help create it, but I certainly can admire. And I think I told you this a couple of days ago. Like, I'm definitely one of those people, that at a stoplight where I'm just sitting there, and my whole, like my car is just vibrating. Like 20 cars around me are feeling the vibrations of my bass, like that's me. And for me, that is vacation for my brain. It's just the little mini vacations that drive to work or that drive to the university. Like it'll just that little tiny vacation will help me so much with just being able to flow. And because it just inspires me. It just the beauty of how someone can put music together like that is just it just floors me. Like how can people be so amazing, to put things together that just create an environment that can just immerse you and take you away.
Love that. A few years ago, I decided that I was going to pursue music, and I had no music background, and it has really changed my thinking and has allowed me to pull some of those patterns into my business development work, into my economic development and social impact work in a way that it was really unexpected. And in a short period of time, I've developed this foundation of music that from nothing, from no music background at all. And I agree. I think that there's a lot to that.
I love the word that you just said, patterns, because it is patterns.
It
Like
is for sure. And I
I love.
think at some point the way I've been learning music theory over the last couple of years has been very different, and it's about patterns. It's an old technique that has been used in Europe for years, hundreds of years, and not really well known in the U.S. It's this music theory is called solfege, and it really is about this pattern of music theory. And in a short period of time, I've developed this amazing foundation through this process. I'd love to sit down with you at some point and talk to you about
Yeah.
these patterns and really how it's changed my thinking and a lot of the way I approach my business and just being creative in general.
That's so cool.
It's
That was really
it's
cool.
been fun. You have talked about McRae Mackleby as somebody that you admire. Do you have other artists that have influenced you or that you admire as well?
Yeah. There's so yeah, McRae Maggabee is definitely one of the big ones. Gustav Klimt is also fellow Austrian. He's huge influence on me as well, and also Hokusai, the Japanese printmaker. I did a lot of printmaking as well in school, and that was definitely a huge influence on me as well. So, and I'm funny. I think I have my big heroes, but then I'm also a little bit like a crow. I identify, I think, as a maybe a magpie or a crow, but I anything that sparkles, I'll go after. So I'll have a lot of different influences depending on what I'm looking at, and I think the whole social media thing is for me is like candy store. I mean, I'm just like, oh man, Instagram is like the biggest thing. uh, I can waste a lot of time looking at artists on Instagram, and they are so inspiring. And they're not like these big players, like these, I some of them I don't even know their names, but they're just so awesome and amazing. And they influence me as well, just and I'll just be scrolling through and just go, wow, look at that. Oh my gosh, and then yeah, and then off to I go to my studio and then and I'm working because just because I saw something on Instagram and I think I think I'm like a crow or like that. I pick things, I anything that I like, I grab it, pick it, and bring it to my studio, and it gets filed away somewhere in there like my nest.
What I think's interesting about you talking about McRae Mackleby as being really your mentor, and you love his work so much. I see a lot of similarities in your work and his work. And so for those that aren't familiar with McRae Mackleby, he's a Utah artist and very well known for he did all of the Olympic paintings when the Olympics were in Salt Lake, and also designed the delicate arch
Oh yeah, yeah.
that's on
License plate.
license plates, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so very iconic in where we are in the Wasatch, but also as world renowned artist. And I see so much similarity between your work and his, Sissy. I think that's amazing.
I'm pretty fortunate. I got really, really, really fortunate with having been able to work with him and having him as my guide for so many years. He's a pretty amazing person.
So we've talked about this creative process, which I think is so critical for all of our work. But let's talk about the graphic art that you and our other graphic artists provide for our team. And I think when I first started in our business now over 30 years ago, I brought this philosophy of I need to see this visually. I need there, and what I found in really studying good business development was that it is a skill to take a complex concept and distill it into something visual. And people have heard me talk about this for years that my strategy and my approach, I think why we've had such success and have won so many amazing proposals over the years is our approach to incorporating graphic art into the campaign. And I used to have a saying when we would put together these really large proposals, complex proposals, I wanted artwork on every page. And I used to drive our proposal managers crazy when we would do this because they'd say, how are we going to create artwork on every page around that's relevant and meaningful? And I'd push them to do that. And I think that because of that, what we found was the decision makers reviewing this work were able to take a complex concept and look at the visual, and it would stick with them, versus trying to consume all of this text. So talk about, you talked about your work in creating art just for the sheer beauty, but when you're tasked to create artwork for something complex, how do you approach it, and what are some of the things that you think about in building artwork for a proposal or for a campaign?
That's really cool that you brought that up because it's something I'm thinking about, a lot, and especially, working here, and it's and this is a thing that I learned in school, the infographics, and but I kind of really yeah, I mean, I didn't focus, but I'm focusing back on it. So, and I'm loving this. I'm loving this learning curve of exactly what you're saying, just taking information and data and reconfiguring it to a visual. And man, is that fun. That is like, talk about creative problem solving. I mean, that is, and it's driving me lately. It's just like super fun to be able to take a problem of like this sheet of just words, and I agree. I think bringing those words to a visual is a lot easier to digest, for someone who's very, very busy, and they're looking through things, and there's a lot of information out there right now, and so to have it easily digestible, and to look at it quickly and be able to say, okay, this is the scope of what I'm looking at, and then I'll dive further in. What a fun thing to do. And so I'm a little bit obsessed with it lately. This whole idea of how I can solve those problems like super efficiently and do it well. It's yeah, I love doing it. And how do you do it? I think, yeah, everyone has a little bit of a different sort of way of approaching that problem. But for me, yeah, it's just organizing, this information and just putting it all on a sheet, and then figuring out, how to best take, the most important information and bring it to the front, and create like this sort of visual that gives you the most important, the hierarchy of the most important information, and then it just trickles down into the smaller details. But talk about fun, man. I mean, it's I feel like I'm like back in school, and I love to learn. So this is like it's crazy stuff, and it's fun. I sit at night and I look at tutorials on infographics and how to best create like the most effective infographics. It's fabulous.
I tell these stories of what business development used to be like, where we would get these RFPs and we would spend 2 years writing 5 and 10,000 page proposals. And it was necessary to win this work. I mean, and it was our business. And yet when I was running these big proposal teams, I mean, I'd say there's no way that anybody's going to read this 10,000 pages of text. There's no way that that's going to happen. And we've done this, we've confirmed this over the years. And as we have become close to a lot of the decision makers who have said, "You're right, we don't read half of it." And so there was this peak maybe 15 years ago where all of our work was around these really complex technical proposals. The pendulum has swung back the other way, where most of our proposals now are under 100 pages. Most of them are 30 pages. And and I think a lot of our longtime proposal team is surprised that I'm still saying I want to see artwork incorporated into the proposal, and even on every page if possible. And they've said we've got such a limited real estate now, where before we had we had the ability to, when we were doing 10,000 pages, we could do all this artwork. And Sissy, we had artists in the office, like doing real painting, not working, they would sit down and sketch, and we'd say, here's our idea. And they would sketch it out by hand and say, how about this? And they would do these storyboards by hand. And, the technology now has changed so much of that. But I think that even now, it's so critical that we have this artwork incorporated into our documents, into our campaigns, because people will remember it. You create an emotion tied to it that you may not be able to create with just text. The other day, I had an opportunity to talk to we've been talking a lot about the IIJA work, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the bipartisan infrastructure law, as a lot of people are referring to it now. And this really fantastic government executive said, I am going to make decisions to award $4 billion, and he's going to do this in the next 6 months. $4 billion of awards. He's put out these RFPs that are 30 pages. The request is that the proposer limit the proposal to 30 pages. You have a 30-page limit on your proposal. He is saying that he expects getting thousands of proposals. And even though it's 30 pages, he's got this anxiety of, how am I going to go through and evaluate these hundreds or thousands of proposals? And I think creating this emotion tied to the artwork on your 30-page proposal and creating something memorable is the key to this.
I agree fully. Yeah, it just sets you apart.
When you're often given a project, create this artwork around a concept that you have no background in. Where do you even start?
So I'm getting a lot of help around the office. Definitely. Lauren is awesome and Summer is awesome. And so everyone is getting me up to speed because it's true. I don't have a whole lot of background in this field, but I can, my sources are pretty awesome. I'm definitely getting some good teaching from, or, learning opportunities from my colleagues. So but, I think this comes back to creativity as well. That whole thing about creative problem solving and just, that realm of creativity. And I think, it doesn't really, even though I might not be really versed in government work and government proposals, but it's this idea of just taking these concepts and creatively solving, this idea and putting it into a visual. So, I think that maybe I'm not, that my world is not, proposals, but it's okay. I think I have a different perspective, and I think those problems, I still can solve them, and hopefully, I get up to speed, and solve them beautifully.
One of the things that I love about your ability and your art, and why I admire your work so much, is that you can create an emotion with a very simple concept. And some of the work that you've done, talk about some of the woodcut pieces that you've done. Those are very simple pieces that evoke such emotion. And you have that ability that is so special. Talk about that.
Thank you very much for saying that. And that's I guess it comes down to just shape language. I guess that it's a language that maybe I learned over many influences. Like I think I've become sensitive to how different shapes and colors can speak to an audience. And I think just as being basic humans, or just like humans basically across the entire globe, we all respond to certain shapes a certain way, and or the environment or the colors, and to simplify that voice or that language down to the very, very minimum is something that I really enjoy doing, and something that I have focused on quite a bit, that to kind of become visually a voice that speaks very directly, and very succinct in a way that, it doesn't take very much to bring an idea across or a concept across. So when you say that, when you notice that from my work and you say that, it's a huge compliment to me. Thank you. I do appreciate it, because that is something that I strive for, is being able to convey a message, through my shape language, that's a very direct and simplified language. Yeah. Thank you.
Some of the work that you've done for me, which I love that Quakey's piece, I thought
Oh,
was just so special, and it was so simple. I mean, just a few colors and a very simple concept, and yet it just was there's so much emotion tied to it. And I see you are able to build that kind of simplicity and emotion with your work incorporated into our proposals and into some of our campaigns, and trying to visualize and illustrate a very complex concept like an ecosystem, or some complex technical initiative that we're trying to convey. And as I think about how you have that ability to translate so much of that emotion, so much into something very simple with very simple design and a color palette, it's just remarkable. And I said, I adore your work. Love what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate those kind words. And I hope that I'm able to simplify, some of these complex, ideas, and, these.
Will you just talk for a minute about that Quakey piece? Because it is, I mean, it's really, I mean, it's a special piece to me, but just talk about it for a minute. And, I've never heard the backstory from it, but I'd love to know what your thoughts were and how you went about it.
Thank you. Yeah, that one is a pretty special piece to me as well. And I think it kind of was a product of a couple of, hard, difficult months. I mean, it was, well, I shouldn't say that, because the pandemic and the whole shutdown and everything. I mean, this was kind of around the beginnings of, that the Quickies kind of came about in a very turbulent, sort of unknown time. And I mean, not that, I mean, that time, I hate to say it, because it was terrible for a lot of people. But for me, it turned out to be a very creative time, because it was an upheaval. And I guess during an upheaval for me is when, all of a sudden my creativity, it grounds me. It's the only thing that can ground me is that sort of that producing. And so the Quakies was really a product of this time where I needed to ground myself desperately. And so there was a lot of things happening, and I was definitely slowing down, which, I had needed at that moment. My life before the pandemic was really, really busy. I mean, I was working a lot, and I had my hands in a lot of things, and in a good way. I mean, I love it. I love when I'm busy, but it was really, really like so busy that I wasn't really able to focus, directly on any one thing. So everything slowed down all of a sudden, and I got outside. That was the only thing, that really at that moment was like safe, was like getting out in the woods, like I didn't want to stay at home. I mean, I was like, no, you can't lock me up in my house. So I did the only thing I knew what to do was go into the mountains, and I isolated in the mountains. I mean, every day I would just go on these long walks, and there was no one out there. So it was fine. It wasn't like, I mean, we were so scared at that moment, any sort of exposure and staying away from anyone. Well, I thought, well, that's the best way is just to be, on the trails. And apparently I wasn't the only one thinking that way, but we stayed away from each other. I mean, if we saw each other on the trails, we kind of walked around each other. So, but it was fine. So yeah, just grounding myself, the trees probably really are a great way to just kind of put my mindset in a so every day I would go up Buce Canyon Trail, which is a local trail, right by the trailhead is right by your house. So every day I would go there and just walk up, and there's one spot on Buce Trail that it just opens up, like it's kind of towards like a little bit up towards the top. It just everything just clears out, and there's just a bunch of quakies. There's tons and tons of quakies, and they sparkle, like especially like in fall. They just the leaves will, and I guess that's why they're called quakies, because the wind hits them, and it's like they're quaking, and that visual sparkling, and at the time it was starting, the colors were just starting to change. So it was just crazy, like the gold color of those quakies and the sparkling. It was intense. I just stood there and I was like, wow. And then you were talking to me about, that your 50 years and the 50-year anniversary. And I was like, wow. Like this whole idea of the gold and the golden, for 50 years, and then the golden quakies, and it all just kind of came together. It was really kind of cool how the colors made that connection with what you were talking to me about. And I don't know if you noticed, like when you're talking to me, I'm like, my mind, like there's like these little sparks like that were flying around my head. I was like, oh. Immediately I went into the studio, and and it took me, it didn't take me more than a few days to kind of get that idea in my head onto a wood block, and I carved it out, and it's actually two wood blocks that it's one is the colors, and the other is the line work. So you just print them up in two different ways. And so, and I had the idea, and I went to the print shop, and so I belong to a printmaking collective in Salt Lake. It's called Saltgrass, and it's a really fabulous place. It's really an amazing little, I don't know, like creative, like hotspot. It's a couple of different studios in there. It's Vogue Foundry and in Saltgrass, and Modern West is in there as well. And so we're all in this one little building, and we all work together and kind of feed off of each other. And so I went there and printed that up, and it was really fun. It was like, and it was the beginnings of a whole nother sort of thing. Like, you encouraged me. You said, hey, this, you were talking about something, and it just like, boom, it went. And then it just, a whole bunch of other stuff just like came flowing out of me after that. It was like you just like released something out of me. And then it was like, and I was, really having fun. And I'm still like, it's still this creative drive. I have so much in my head right now that you kind of inspired with, the whole Quakies was like the gateway print.
I love it. It's amazing, and so just simple, and it really creates a lot of emotion when I think about it even now. So.
Thank you.
Well, Sissy, thanks for doing this. As we wrap up, is there do you have advice for individuals in our field, especially in the work that we do, on how they can be better creative, how they can channel creativity? Talked about some of these things of getting into nature, and you have other advice that you can give to our team and our clients as they try to build creativity and strengthen creativity in their work?
That's a yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I mean, creativity, for us, I mean, we kind of we're in the same sort of mindset that the mountains and nature and that inspires, and music inspires, but for everyone it's different. And finding that is probably the key. I mean, everyone has a different way of, their wiring is different. And for some people, it's just the simple act of playing video games, and video games will release this sort of block that maybe that is bothering them, and they can create or solve a problem that way. So finding that is important and underestimated. I think the loops that you can get into, when you have a problem that you need to solve, and you just keep on looping and looping and looping, breaking that cycle is key, and figuring it out, for yourself. Like, I hear advice all the time, like especially like meditation and yoga and things like that. Oh my gosh, there's no way I can sit quietly for, I don't know how many minutes you need to do that. I don't know. But there's no way. There's like, and I admire people who can actually do that, but it's not for me. I mean, and like people say, oh, just, sit quietly and breathe and listen to your breathing. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, there's no way, so, but that adds like this immense amount of stress, that like, okay, so I'm not doing it right, but that's not fair. It's just not right for me.
It's finding what is the path that
Yeah,
you need to
yeah,
be creative all the time. Be creative even when you don't want to be creative, even when you don't feel like doing it, that you've got your own algorithm of what works.
yeah. And
That's
and
great.
figuring that algorithm
Great
out.
advice. I'm reading a book. I'll give it to you when I'm done. It's very interesting. It's called Bittersweet. And one of the things I discovered in this pursuing this interest in music was I love sad music. I love minor music. And, a lot of people, they hate it. They hate listening to something in B minor or some, this really sad music. I love it. And as I learned all of the various keys and theory, it's like, oh my goodness, I really love music written in these minor keys. And this book, we'll put a link into it. I love this author. Her name's Susan Cain, and she's written this book about, yeah, it's people shun adversity and challenges, and yet that may be a source of creativity for some people, and I've kind of discovered that is for me.
That's so cool. And and just unabashedly, saying that's for me, and
Right.
I don't care what anyone says.
No, exactly, that's right. Anything else, Sissy, as we wrap this up?
Thank you for the opportunity, and yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was fun.
Good. I have as well. I've looked forward to doing this. We'll do some more of these with you. I love your work. I love the work that you've done for me, and I admire you and your creativity so much, and I love the opportunity to be working with you. And so thank you for this.
Thank you very much for your kind words, and I'm honored to be working with you. So yeah, thank you.